The morning started like any other. The sound of the kettle whistling, the faint aroma of cardamom tea drifting through the kitchen, and the clink of porcelain cups as my mother set them on the table. The house was quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock, its pendulum swinging like a judge's gavel marking time. I sat across from her, half asleep, my fingers tracing the rim of my mug. For a moment, I thought this day would pass as countless others had, another day of being invisible in my own family. But then she spoke. "You're not coming to your brother's wedding." The words cut through the silence like a blade. No build-up, no softening of the blow, just cold, flat truth laid bare on the table. I blinked. What? She didn't even meet my eyes. She stirred 2 spoonfuls of sugar into her tea, the spoon clinking against the sides, and spoke with the same calmness she might use to comment on the weather. "It's for the best. You just embarrass the family." Embarrass. That single word echoed in my skull, ringing louder than the ticking clock. I wanted to believe I'd misheard her, that she meant something else, anything else. But her tone was steady, matter of fact. It wasn't a slip of the tongue, it was a judgment. My throat tightened. "I'd embarrass you? How?" Finally, she looked up. Her eyes, dark and sharp, pinned me in place. There was no trace of affection, no flicker of maternal warmth. Just cold calculation like I was a problem she had to manage. "You don't have anything to show for yourself. No husband. No stable career. You're average at best. This is your brother's big day, and I won't let you overshadow him by reminding people that not all of my children turned out successful." My chest caved in. She didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as a blemish. I swallowed hard, desperate to keep my voice from cracking. "Mom, it's my brother's wedding. Why would anyone be looking at me?" She sighed, like she was exhausted by the very sound of my voice. "People talk. They always do. They'll ask why you're still single, why you haven't made anything of yourself. And I don't want their pity. I don't want whispers at my son's celebration. Do you understand?" I stared at her, stunned into silence. Her words weren't just cruel, they were deliberate. She wasn't worried about me. She was worried about herself. At that moment, something inside me cracked. For years, I had played the role she cast me in, the forgotten daughter, the one who wasn't good enough, the one who faded into the background while my brother was showered with praise. Every holiday, every family gathering, he was the golden child, and I was tolerated. Barely. But this? Banning me from his wedding because I'd embarrass her? That was different. This wasn't passive neglect. This was an open declaration. "You don't belong." I clenched my hands beneath the table, my nails digging into my palms. 1,000 memories assaulted me at once. Birthdays where my cake was smaller, holidays where my gifts were practical while my brother's were extravagant, dinners where my achievements were brushed aside while his were applauded. I had endured it all quietly, telling myself maybe one day she'd notice me. Maybe one day I'd be enough. But now she had spoken her truth. I wasn't enough. And I never would be. "Okay," I whispered, my voice shaking despite my best effort. "If that's how you feel." Her shoulders relaxed. She smiled faintly, satisfied, as if I'd just agreed to help her with groceries instead of accepting a rejection that split me in two. "Good. Don't make this about you." Then she rose from her chair, tea in hand, and walked away without another glance. I sat there long after she left, my tea untouched, the steam curling upward like a ghost. My body felt heavy, but my chest was hollow. My mother had just erased me from the family narrative, and she hadn't even flinched. I should have cried. I should have broken down. But instead, I sat still, trembling, listening to the relentless tick of the clock. Something inside me stirred. It wasn't sadness anymore. It wasn't even anger. It was fire, a quiet, simmering flame in the pit of my stomach. If she thought I was an embarrassment, if she thought I wasn't worthy of standing in their spotlight, then I would create a spotlight so bright, so undeniable, that no one could ignore me again. And when the time came, my mother would regret ever underestimating me. After my mother's words, I couldn't move from the table. The tea had gone cold, the clock hands had shifted, and still, I sat there, trapped in memories I had spent years burying. Her rejection wasn't born that morning. It was years in the making. I could trace it all the way back to childhood, when the seeds of favoritism were planted and watered until they grew into walls I could never climb. My brother, Daniel, had always been the sun in her sky. From the moment he was born, she beamed with pride. His first steps? Celebrated with a family gathering. His first drawing? Framed and hung on the wall. His high school graduation? She cried like she had just witnessed a miracle. And me? I was the shadow. I remember one birthday in particular, my 12th. I had spent weeks begging for a guitar. Music was the only thing that made me feel alive back then, the only thing that gave me an identity outside being Daniel's sister. On the morning of my birthday, I walked into the living room to find a box waiting for me, wrapped in cheap paper. My heart leapt. Maybe, just maybe, this time she had listened. But when I tore it open, my excitement drained. Inside was a stack of school supplies. Notebooks. Pencils. A calculator. Useful things, she said briskly. You need to focus on your studies, not waste time on silly dreams. The same year, for Daniel's 14th birthday, he got a brand new gaming console. That was the story of my life. Practicality for me, extravagance for him. And the cruelest part? It wasn't even about money. We weren't poor. My parents had enough to give us both joy. But joy was reserved for him. When I graduated high school with honors, my mom's only comment was, "That's expected. Nothing special." When Daniel scraped through his classes, she threw a dinner party for him anyway. "It doesn't matter," she said, beaming. "He has charm. He'll go far."
Charm.
That was the word she always used. He had charm. He had presence. He was someone she could boast about at church, at neighborhood barbecues, at weddings. And me? I was quiet,
Reserved.
I blended into the background. But blending in had become my defense mechanism. If I drew attention, I invited comparison. And I never won those battles. So I stayed in the shadows. Until now. Now, she had made sure the world knew where she stood. Banning me from his wedding wasn't just about that day. It was about cementing the hierarchy once and for all. Daniel, the golden son in the spotlight. Me, the daughter so insignificant she was better erased than acknowledged. The more I thought about it, the deeper the knife twisted. I remembered Christmas 2 years ago. Daniel had brought home his girlfriend, and my mom fawned over her like royalty. She insisted on taking dozens of pictures, cooking a feast, and making sure everything was perfect. When I brought my college friend, a sweet, kind girl who had supported me through tough times, Mom barely said hello. Later that night, she pulled me aside and hissed, "Don't bring people like that here again. You're embarrassing yourself." Embarrassing. That word again.
Always tied to me.
Always her excuse. My hands clenched into fists on the table. I could still hear her voice from earlier that morning, dripping with disdain. "You don't have anything to show for yourself. No husband. No stable career. You're average at best." Average. I had tried so hard not to be. I had worked temp jobs, tried freelance gigs, even gone back to school, searching for a path that would make her proud. But nothing was ever enough. She didn't want to make an effort. She wanted perfection, or at least the illusion of it. And when she couldn't find that in me, she dismissed me entirely. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them back. I had cried enough over the years. Crying never changed anything. I thought back to when I was 17, sitting in my room strumming the cheap secondhand guitar I'd eventually bought myself with babysitting money. For the first time, I felt like I was breathing. But when Mom passed by my door and saw me playing, she scowled. "Noise," she muttered, slamming the door shut. That was her way. Anything that didn't fit her vision of success was noise. Anything that didn't shine as brightly as Daniel was a flaw. And yet here I was, still seeking her approval. Even now, even after her words had shattered me, some pathetic part of me wanted her to turn around and say, "I didn't mean it. You matter." But she wouldn't. I knew she wouldn't. I pushed the mug away and stood, my legs trembling. I walked to the window, staring out at the gray sky. In the neighbor's yard, kids were playing, their laughter carried on the breeze. Life outside our house felt so normal, so untouched by the cruelty I'd just endured. Why couldn't my life be that simple? Why did I always have to fight just to exist? My reflection in the glass stared back at me, tired eyes, slouched shoulders, the weight of years of rejection written across my face. And in that moment, I hated what I saw, not because of who I was, but because of what she had made me believe. Embarrassment, I whispered bitterly. The word tasted like poison. But as I stood there, something unexpected stirred.
A spark.
Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was survival. But deep inside, a voice I hadn't heard in years whispered, "You're more than this." I straightened my back. My reflection didn't look so weak anymore. She thought I was invisible?
Fine.
I'd let her believe it. Because one day soon, I would show her and the entire town that I wasn't the embarrassment of the family. I was the storm they never saw coming. The following day, the house was alive with chatter. My mother's phone buzzed endlessly, her voice echoing down the hallway as she made call after call. I knew the topic even before I heard her words. Yes, the invitations are out. Yes, it will be beautiful. Oh, Daniel and Rachel make the perfect couple. Her pride rang clear, every syllable polished with the shine she reserved only for him. I lingered at the doorway, unseen, watching her as she adjusted the flowers on the counter, humming to herself. She looked radiant.
Proud. Alive.
And for a moment I wondered, would she ever look at me like that? Would she ever talk about me with the same warmth, the same pride? The answer came before I could even hope. She hung up the call and turned, catching me in the doorway. Her smile vanished instantly, replaced with that familiar disapproval. "What are you doing just standing there?" I wanted to ask, I began carefully, if I could help with anything. For the wedding. Her eyes narrowed, as if I had asked to ruin the whole event.
No.
"There's nothing for you to do." But I thought maybe. Stop. Her tone was sharp enough to silence me mid-sentence. She set her phone down and crossed her arms. "We already discussed this. You are not coming." The finality in her voice hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just a rule, it was exile. My chest tightened. "Mom, please. He's my brother. Don't you think it would look strange if I weren't there?" She scoffed, waving me off as if I were a child. "People won't notice. And if they do, I'll tell them you were too busy. That's better than you standing there like some charity case." Charity case? My voice cracked. Her expression softened, but only slightly, the way someone might soften when explaining something obvious to a slow learner. "Honey, don't take it so personally. It's not about you, it's about appearances. You'd stick out. And not in a good way." I felt the air leave my lungs. All these years of being overlooked, ignored, treated as less, and now, she didn't even want to be associated with me on the most important family day of all. "I'm her daughter," I whispered, my voice trembling. "How can you say that to me?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Because I have to. You need to face reality. Daniel is the one with a future. You," she paused, looking me up and down as though I were a stranger. "You're lost. And I can't let your failures drag us down." Failures. The word felt like a slap. Something inside me snapped. For years, I had accepted the role she forced on me. The quiet one. The overlooked one. The one who didn't shine. But now, she wasn't just dimming my light. She was snuffing it out completely. Hot tears blurred my vision. My hand shook, but I refused to let her see me break. Not this time. "Fine," I choked out. "If that's how you feel, then don't worry. I won't be anywhere near your perfect little show." Her shoulders relaxed, almost in relief. "Good. You're finally being reasonable." She turned away, picking up her phone again, her smile instantly returning as she dialed another number. I stood there, watching her laugh, her voice warm as she spoke to some guest about Daniel's big day, and it was like I didn't exist. That's when it hit me. In her world, I really didn't exist. I walked back to my room on unsteady legs, slamming the door behind me. The moment it shut, I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow. My body shook with sobs I had held back for too long. Every word she'd said replayed in my head, each one sharper than the last. Embarrassment. Average. Failure. I cried until my throat was raw, until my chest ached. And in that storm of grief, one thought circled in my mind like a vulture. What if she's right? What if I really was nothing more than a disappointment? What if I really was the family shame? The thought strangled me. For a moment, I almost believed it. But then something shifted. The longer I lay there, the more a different thought pushed through the despair. A stubborn, fiery thought that refused to die.
No, she's wrong.
I sat up, wiping my tears with trembling hands. My face in the mirror was swollen, red-eyed, broken. But behind the mess, I saw something new. Determination. She had taken everything from me. My confidence, my place in the family, even the right to stand beside my brother on his wedding day. But there was one thing she hadn't taken. My will. If she thought I was invisible, then I would become unforgettable. If she thought I was average, then I would prove myself extraordinary. If she thought I was a failure, then I would rise higher than even her precious golden sun. Not out of love, not out of a need for her approval, but out of revenge. And as that thought settled in, I felt something inside me harden, like steel being forged. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. This was about showing her, showing all of them, that the daughter they dismissed was the one they should have feared all along. The countdown had begun. The days that followed blurred together. I avoided the kitchen, avoided my mother, avoided the endless phone calls and chatter about flowers and catering and guest lists. Everywhere I turned, the house was alive with wedding talk, but for me it was a funeral, the burial of whatever place I had left in this family. Every detail of the upcoming event felt like another reminder that I didn't belong. Invitations were stacked neatly on the counter. Fittings for dresses I wasn't allowed to wear. Conversations about seating arrangements where my name was never mentioned. It was as if I had been erased. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest heavy with questions I couldn't silence. What's wrong with me? Why am I never enough? Why is Daniel celebrated for existing while I'm shamed for breathing? I thought about the word failure over and over. My mother had hurled it so casually, like it was a fact she'd accepted long ago. And the more I thought about it, the more it ate at me. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was a failure. After all, what did I have to show for myself? No husband. No stable job. No shiny achievements to plaster on the family mantle. My life was a string of half-starts, of almosts, of things that never quite worked out. I had convinced myself for years that one day, I'd find my path, and then she'd finally see me.
But now?
She didn't even want me in the room. One evening, I broke. I sat on the floor of my room, my back against the bed, tears streaming silently down my face. I didn't bother wiping them away. My chest rose and fell in jagged sobs. The loneliness was crushing. I thought of calling someone, a friend, anyone. But I didn't. Because deep down, I knew what they'd say. They'd tell me to ignore her, to move on, to find peace elsewhere. And maybe they'd be right. But at that moment, I didn't want peace. I wanted justice. I wanted her to feel even a fraction of the pain she'd inflicted on me. But how? How does the forgotten daughter fight back against the family that branded her an embarrassment? That night, I dreamed of the wedding. I saw Daniel standing at the altar, radiant and adored, the center of everything. I saw my mother in the front row, her face glowing with pride. And I saw myself, outside the church, in the rain, my dress clinging to me as I pressed my face to the window, begging silently to be let in. I woke up gasping, my pillow damp with tears. And in that moment I realized, this was who I had become. Someone is waiting outside the window, hoping to be let in. No more. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror, my eyes swollen, my face pale. But beneath the exhaustion, there was something new. A spark. A defiance that hadn't been there before. I whispered to my reflection, my voice hoarse but steady. They don't get to decide who I am. Not anymore. It was such a small thing, just words spoken into an empty room. But it was the first time I had declared it out loud. The first time I had rejected the role she had written for me. And once the words were spoken, I couldn't take them back. Over the next few days, that spark grew. Slowly, carefully, like a flame catching on dry wood. I began to imagine a different future. Not one where I begged for scraps of love from my family, but one where I created something entirely my own. A future where their rejection became my fuel. At first, the ideas were small. What if I took a trip the week of the wedding, so I wouldn't have to endure the whispers? What if I started a new job, just to prove her wrong? But then the thoughts grew bigger, bolder. What if I had a wedding of my own? The thought hit me like lightning. My chest tightened, my mind racing. It was crazy.
Impossible.
I wasn't even engaged. I didn't have the money, the connections, the means. And yet the idea wouldn't leave me. Because what better way to silence the word embarrassment than to turn it into a spectacle so dazzling, so unforgettable, that people would forget I had ever been dismissed at all. A wedding wasn't just about love. It was about a celebration, about being seen, about proving that you mattered. And if my mother thought I wasn't worthy of standing at Daniel's wedding, then maybe, just maybe, I would create a wedding so breathtaking that Daniel's would pale in comparison. The thought both terrified and electrified me. It was reckless. It was insane. But for the first time in years, I felt alive. I pressed my palms against the mirror, staring at the fire in my own eyes. They think I'm an embarrassment, I whispered. I'll show them what embarrassment really looks like. And though I had no plan, no partner, no resources, I had something more powerful. I had a reason, and that reason was revenge. The seed of the idea refused to leave me. At first, it lived only in the quiet corners of my mind, a ridiculous fantasy I entertained to survive the ache of being excluded. But every day that passed, it grew. What if I really did it? What if I staged my own wedding? Not to prove I was married, but to prove that I didn't need their approval to be celebrated. The thought scared me. I didn't even have a groom, for heaven's sake.
People would laugh.
They'd call it desperate, delusional. My mother would sneer and use it as proof that I was unstable. But the more I considered it, the more it began to shift. Why did a wedding have to be about a groom at all?
Why couldn't it be about me?
About reclaiming the spotlight that had always been denied to me? One night, I sat on my bed with my laptop open, scrolling through images of seaside ceremonies. White canopies, golden sunsets, waves crashing against rocky shores, brides standing barefoot in the sand, hair whipped by the ocean breeze, faces glowing with joy. I wasn't looking at them with envy anymore. I was studying them, analyzing every detail. I imagined myself there. My heart raced as I scribbled notes in a cheap spiral notebook. Venue ideas, dress concepts, guest lists, not family, never family, but friends, colleagues, people who would actually cheer for me. The idea was insane, completely unhinged. And yet, it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: direction. For once, I wasn't thinking about how to dodge my mother's insults or how to endure another family dinner. I was planning something for myself. Something audacious. The first real test came when my best friend, Lila, called. She knew something was wrong. My voice had been flat lately, my replies short. She finally demanded I tell her what had happened. I hesitated, then spilled everything. My mother's words, the exclusion, the humiliation. There was silence on the line, then a sharp intake of breath. She said, "You'd embarrass the family?" Lila's voice shook with anger. "Are you kidding me?" I tried to laugh it off, but it came out brittle. "I guess I should be used to it by now." "No," she snapped. "No, you don't just get used to that kind of cruelty. That woman has spent your whole life making you feel like you don't belong. But you do belong, Ava. And you're going to prove it." I swallowed hard. My throat burned. What if I told you? I was thinking of hosting my own wedding. Dead silence. Then, "Do you have something to tell me? Are you engaged?" I laughed for real this time, though it was shaky. No, not like that. I mean a wedding for me. A celebration. Just me. I don't need a groom to stand in front of an altar. I just need a chance to show I'm not the embarrassment she says I am. Lila was quiet for a long moment. I braced myself for her to laugh, to tell me I was being ridiculous. But instead, she said, "That's the most badass thing I've ever heard." My breath caught. "You think I should do it?" "I think you have to do it," she said firmly. "And I'll help you. Every step of the way." For the first time, my wild fantasy had an ally. Over the next week, Lila and I started brainstorming. She had a cousin who worked at a coastal resort. She knew a freelance photographer who owed her a favor. She even pulled strings with a local florist who sometimes needed exposure. Piece by piece, a vague dream began to look like a real possibility. Of course, money was an issue. I wasn't sitting on a fortune. But I had savings, money I had intended for moving out, for starting fresh someday. Maybe this was my fresh start. I worked overtime shifts at the cafe, where I'd picked up part-time work. I sketched designs for my dress at night, scouring thrift shops for fabric I could repurpose. Every extra dollar went into what Lila and I jokingly called the Revenge Wedding Fund. The secrecy was exhilarating. I'd walk past my mother in the hallway as she bragged on the phone about Daniel's big day, and I'd bite back a smile. She had no idea what I was building. But it wasn't just secrecy. It was a transformation. For the first time, I felt in control. Every insult she had ever thrown at me became fuel. Every sneer, every dismissal, it all poured into this project. There were setbacks, of course. Venues that quoted outrageous prices. Vendors who laughed when I explained what I was doing. Nights when doubt crept back in, whispering that I was delusional, that no one would come, that I would only humiliate myself further. But each time the doubt rose, I pictured her face. My mother's smug expression as she told me I would embarrass the family. And I swore I would flip that script. The day Daniel's wedding invitations arrived at the house, I didn't cry. I didn't lock myself in my room. I smiled, slipped my own notebook under my arm, and whispered to myself, "Your show is coming." The first concrete step was the venue. Without it, the dream was just a fantasy scribbled in a notebook. Lila's cousin, Mateo, worked as an event manager at a coastal resort about an hour's drive from town. He agreed to meet us on a quiet Thursday morning. I'll never forget the first time I stepped onto that beach. The air was salt-sweet, the waves thundered in the distance, and the sand was cool beneath my shoes. "This," I whispered, my voice catching in my throat. "This is where it's going to happen." Mateo eyed me skeptically at first when I explained the concept. "So, a wedding without a groom?" "Call it a celebration," I said quickly, my cheeks hot. "A celebration of choosing myself." He studied me for a moment, then shrugged. "Honestly, that's kind of brilliant."
Different.
"People will talk." That was exactly the point. We walked through the grounds, the weathered wooden deck that overlooked the water, the palm trees that swayed in the breeze, the soft stretch of sand where the tide kissed the shore. With each step, my vision sharpened. I could see the white canopy draped in fabric. The aisle was scattered with seashells instead of roses. A single seat at the altar, not for a groom, but for me. By the time we left, Mateo had promised to hold the date for me. It wasn't cheap, but he offered a discount when Lila reminded him of the favors their families had exchanged over the years. I left the meeting clutching the paperwork like it was sacred. The foundation had been laid. My wedding, my revenge, had a home. From there, the work consumed me. At the cafe, I doubled my shifts, pouring lattes and scrubbing counters until my body ached. Every tip went into a plain white envelope I kept hidden in a shoebox under my bed. Some nights, I'd dump it out on the floor, smoothing the bills with trembling hands, whispering to myself that this was freedom money. In my spare time, Lila and I pieced the details together. She set up meetings with a florist friend who specialized in wild arrangements that looked like they'd been plucked straight from the earth. We decided on soft, ocean-inspired colors: ivory, seafoam green, pale coral. "Not stiff or perfect," I told her. I wanted to look alive. Real. Like me.
She grinned.
Finally, Ava gets to be real. The dress became my obsession. I couldn't afford designer gowns, but I didn't need one. I wanted something uniquely mine. I scoured thrift shops, buying discarded wedding dresses, tearing them apart at night in my room with a borrowed sewing machine. Piece by piece, I built something new. Lace stitched to flowing silk, sleeves cut away to leave my shoulders bare, fabric dyed the faintest shade of blue, like the horizon at dawn. Every stitch was a declaration. I am not your embarrassment. I am my own masterpiece. Keeping it secret from my family was harder than I thought. My mother, ever suspicious, began to notice my long absences. "Where do you keep disappearing to?" she asked one evening, narrowing her eyes over dinner. "Extra shifts," I lied smoothly, sipping water to hide the tremor in my hands. She snorted. "For what? A bigger apartment you'll never move into? You should save your energy, Ava. Focus on finding a man before you waste your best years." I smiled faintly, biting down the sharp retort that burned on my tongue. If only she knew. If only she could see the empire I was quietly building under her nose. Daniel, meanwhile, floated through the house like a prince preparing for a coronation. He spoke of tuxedo fittings and rehearsal dinners, of gifts showered upon him by relatives near and far. He never once asked why I was so quiet, why I spent nights locked in my room. Good. Let him stay blind. The real turning point came the day I booked the photographer. Lila's connection, a woman named Harper, was quirky and bold, with streaks of blue in her hair and a camera that seemed permanently attached to her hands. When I explained my idea, she didn't laugh. She leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "You're telling me you want to throw a wedding for yourself, by the ocean, as a statement of independence?" "Yes," I said firmly, my heart hammering. She grinned widely. "That's viral. That's a movement. People eat this stuff up. They'll share it, they'll talk about it, they'll celebrate it." The word viral stuck in my ears like music. I hadn't dared dream that far, but now I saw it. The possibility of my story spreading beyond the town, beyond my family's circle. My mother's insult turned into an anthem for strangers who had felt the same sting of rejection. We signed the contract on the spot. From then on, I lived a double life. By day, I played the quiet daughter, the overlooked sister, watching silently as the house buzzed with Daniel's wedding plans. By night, I stitched gowns, drafted guest lists, and whispered with Lila about canopies and seating charts.
It was exhausting.
But it was glorious. Because for the first time, my life wasn't defined by what I lacked. It was defined by what I was building. The foundations of my revenge weren't just in contracts and cash envelopes. They were in me, in the growing certainty that I was no one's embarrassment, no one's failure. I was becoming something else entirely. And soon, the world and my family would see it. The next step was deciding who would be there. That was where the real power of this plan lived. Weddings weren't just about the flowers or the dress. They were about the audience, about the people who bore witness. My mother could throw me out of Daniel's wedding, but if I could fill a seaside ceremony with people who wanted me there, then her judgment meant nothing. At first, the list was easy. Lila, of course, front and center. Then a few of my coworkers from the cafe, the ones who had cheered me up on long shifts, who teased me affectionately when I burned a cappuccino or forgot an order. They didn't know the whole story, but they knew enough. They'd come. Then I thought about old friends. People I hadn't spoken to in years because I'd been too ashamed to explain my family's coldness. People who had once believed in me, who would probably still want to. I drafted their names in looping letters, hesitating over some, circling others. But as the list grew, so did the vision. This wasn't just about filling chairs. This was about making a statement. I wanted journalists, bloggers, influencers, people who could take photos and post them online, people whose voices stretched far beyond this town. Because if my mother's rejection was going to sting, then my response had to roar. So Lila and I got strategic. We searched hashtags, found writers who specialized in unconventional love stories, and reached out to photographers who loved unique events. We sent carefully worded emails, an unconventional seaside wedding, a story about self-love, resilience, and defiance. Interested in attending? Most ignored us. Some politely declined. But a handful, a precious handful, wrote back with curiosity. They wanted more details. They wanted to cover it. Each yes felt like a spark in my chest. My little act of rebellion was growing teeth. The secrecy was its own thrill. I carried my notebook everywhere, the pages filling with names and seating arrangements, sketches of arches and tables, ideas for vows I would write to myself. One evening, Daniel waltzed into the kitchen, phone in hand, boasting about his bachelor party. My mother laughed, clapped her hands, and poured him wine. I sat silently at the table, nodding when spoken to, my pen hidden under the table as I scribbled another name onto my guest list. "Don't look so sour, Ava," my mother said suddenly, catching my stillness. "You'll get your turn someday. If you ever manage to keep a man, that is." Her laughter rang sharp against my ears. But I didn't flinch. I just glanced at the list in my lap, 40 names and counting, and thought, you have no idea my turn is already coming. The more I worked, the more the wedding shifted from revenge into something deeper. It wasn't just about proving her wrong anymore. It was about rewriting my story. Every name I wrote was a reminder that I wasn't invisible, that I mattered, that people wanted to be there for me. One night, while Lila and I sat cross-legged on her floor with papers spread everywhere, she looked at me and said softly, "Do you realize what you're doing?" I frowned. "Planning a fake wedding?" "No," she said. "You're taking back your life. You're telling your mom, your whole family, the entire world, that you're not waiting for their approval anymore. That you're enough. You always were." The words hit me harder than I expected. My throat closed, and I blinked fast to keep from crying. Because deep down, that was what this was really about. For the first time, I was saying yes to myself. Of course, it wasn't all smooth. Some people didn't take me seriously. When I invited a distant cousin, she laughed out loud. "Ava, come on. A wedding without a groom? Are you trying to make a joke out of yourself?" The old me would have crumbled, would have withdrawn the invitation in shame. But the new me? I smiled sweetly and said, "You'll regret not coming. Trust me." Because I knew that this event would be unforgettable. By the end of the month, my list had grown to nearly 100 names. 100 people who would show up not to watch me play the role of an embarrassment, but to celebrate me in full. And here's the best part. Word began to spread. Lila let it slip to a friend with a big social following. That friend posted a cryptic story, "Local girl planning the wedding of the year, but it's not what you think.
Stay tuned."
Within hours, messages trickled into my inbox. Strangers are curious, intrigued, even inspired. It was working. The narrative was changing. For once, the whispers weren't about me being a failure. They were about me being bold, different, worth watching. And as I closed my notebook that night, staring at the pages filled with names and sketches and plans, I realized something monumental. I wasn't just preparing for revenge. I was preparing to step into the version of myself I had always been too afraid to be. And the best part? My family wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. The dress became the heart of it all. Every night, after long shifts at the cafe and stolen hours spent working with Lila on guest lists and vendors, I returned to my small room and pulled out the pieces I'd been collecting. Bits of lace, sections of satin, an old veil from a thrift store that still carried the faint smell of lavender. I spread them across my bed like puzzle pieces, hands trembling with excitement and fear. I wasn't just sewing a dress. I was stitching together all the parts of myself that had been dismissed, ignored, mocked. The broken scraps no one else valued, just like me, were becoming something whole. Something extraordinary. The first cut was terrifying. The blade of the scissors sliced through a layer of ivory silk, and for a moment, I froze. What if I ruined it? What if it looked ridiculous? But then I thought of my mother's voice, sharp and cold. "You'd embarrass the family." And suddenly, the fear burned away. If I were going to be an embarrassment, then I would be the most breathtaking embarrassment she'd ever seen. So I cut. I stitched. I bled when the needle pricked my fingers. I stayed up until dawn some nights, my eyes burning as I hunched over the sewing machine, the whir of the needle my lullaby. Slowly, the dress took shape. The bodice was fitted with delicate lace, stitched carefully to flatter my form. The skirt flowed wide and soft, dyed the faintest whisper of blue, like seawater under moonlight. I left the back open, tied with thin ribbons that crisscrossed like waves. When I tried it on for the first time, standing barefoot in front of my mirror, my breath caught in my chest. I wasn't looking at the girl my mother sneered at anymore. I wasn't the daughter who failed, the sister who didn't measure up. I was radiant. For the first time in my life, I saw a bride in the mirror. Not because of a groom, not because of some man's choice, but because I chose myself. Hiding it from my family was another battle. I folded the dress carefully into a garment bag, slipping it under my bed when I wasn't working on it. Every time my mother barged into my room, without knocking, as usual, my heart lurched, terrified she'd discover it. Once, she almost did. She came in while I was pinning the hem, fabric spread across my lap. I barely managed to shove it under a blanket before she narrowed her eyes. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Fixing an old dress." I lied quickly, my hands sweaty.
She scoffed.
"Don't waste your time. Nothing you wear will change the truth." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood, forcing a smile. Maybe I just like creating things. She rolled her eyes and left, muttering something about priorities. When the door shut, I clutched the fabric against my chest, my pulse racing. She had no idea how wrong she was. Nothing I wore would change the truth, but this dress was going to reveal it. Meanwhile, Daniel paraded around the house, bragging about his tuxedo fitting. Tailored Italian wool, he announced at dinner one evening, adjusting imaginary cufflinks on his wrists. The kind that makes you feel like royalty. My mother cooed in delight, eyes shining with pride. "My handsome son. Everyone will be talking about you." I lowered my gaze to my plate, biting back a laugh. Everyone will be talking, all right.
But not about you.
Because while he bragged about imported fabrics and luxury tailoring, I was building something priceless with my own two hands. Something no tailor could replicate. The final touches nearly broke me. I wanted a veil, but not the stiff, suffocating kind I'd always hated. I wanted something soft, something that floated like mist. I found an old curtain panel at a second-hand shop, sheer and delicate. With a little trimming and beading, it became exactly what I had envisioned, a veil that shimmered like ocean spray. Then there were the shoes. I didn't want towering heels. I wanted freedom. I found simple ivory sandals, barely their straps that would let me walk easily on the sand. Every detail spoke of who I really was, not who my family wanted me to be. The night I finished the dress, I slipped it on once more, fastening the ribbons, pulling the veil gently over my hair. I lit a single candle on my dresser, the flame flickering softly against the mirror. And then I stood there, staring at myself for a long, long time. Tears stung my eyes, but this time, they weren't from pain. They were in awe. The girl in the mirror wasn't broken. She wasn't a mistake. She wasn't an embarrassment. She was beautiful, powerful,
whole.
I lifted the veil from my face, whispering into the quiet room, "You are enough." And for the first time, I believed it. The dress wasn't just clothing. It was armor. And when the day came, I would walk into the world wearing it like a declaration. The family that cast me out would never see me coming. The calendar became my enemy. Every morning, I'd pass the one in the kitchen. Bright red X's slashed through each day, marking the countdown to Daniel's wedding. My mother had circled the date in gold ink, adding hearts and little notes like flower delivery and rehearsal dinner. I never touched the calendar. But in my room, hidden under my mattress, I had my own. The days were marked with neat blue ink, counting down not to Daniel's wedding, but to mine. 2 timelines running side by side. One celebrated the son, who could do no wrong. The other belonged to the daughter they'd tried to erase. And soon, those timelines would collide. The house buzzed louder with each passing day. Caterers came and went. Delivery trucks pulled up with boxes of wine, and relatives I barely recognized arrived to tour the venue. My mother was in her element, strutting around with her clipboard, barking orders, glowing with the pride of a queen preparing her heir's coronation. I watched it all in silence, my face carefully neutral. Let them think I was sulking. Let them whisper that I was jealous. I didn't care. Because while they fussed over Daniel's bow tie and seating chart, I was building something bigger, quieter, deadlier. The secret planning reached a fever pitch. Lila and I spent late nights at her apartment, hunched over glowing laptops, finalizing last-minute details. Okay, she said one night, scrolling through emails. Photographer confirmed. Florist confirmed. Caterers a maybe, but I think we can swing it. I scribbled notes in my journal, heart pounding. What about music? I got a local string quartet. They're excited. It's unconventional, but they love unconventional. I laughed, nerves bubbling in my chest. Unconventional might as well be my middle name. Each confirmation was a victory, each checkmark a tiny rebellion against the family who had ridden me off. But the secrecy grew harder. Daniel was too self-absorbed to notice, but my mother's suspicion sharpened. She asked questions about my long absences, my late nights. "You're not seeing anyone, are you?" she asked one afternoon, her tone dripping with disapproval. "No," I said quickly, too quickly. She narrowed her eyes.
Good.
"I'd hate to see you make another foolish mistake." The insult stung, but I swallowed it down. What she didn't know couldn't hurt me, until the day it would. The week before the weddings, his and mine, tension crackled in the air. Daniel strutted around in his tuxedo after the final fitting, twirling in front of the mirror while my mother clapped like he was a celebrity. I lingered in the doorway, my secret burning in my chest. You think you're the star, Daniel, but your spotlight's about to dim. That same night, I slipped away to Lila's apartment, dress folded carefully in its garment bag. We laid it across her couch, smoothing the fabric, double-checking every detail. "You're ready," Lila whispered. "This is going to blow everything else out of the water." My throat tightened. "Do you think people will understand? Or will they think I'm crazy?" She took my hands, squeezing them hard. "Ava, people are starving for stories like yours. People who choose themselves. People who refuse to play the role their family writes for them. Trust me, when they see you walking down that aisle, no one will think you're crazy. They'll think you're unstoppable." Her words lit a fire inside me. The final 3 days were agony. Everywhere I went, Daniel's wedding loomed. Family members flew in, filling the house with laughter that excluded me. My mother stayed up late perfecting details, her voice sharp as she barked instructions down the phone. And I stayed silent, invisible, a ghost drifting through the house. But inside I was alive. My seaside ceremony was set. Guests confirmed. The florist promised to deliver at dawn. The photographer was already teasing shots on her social media, hinting that something unforgettable was coming. 2 worlds, side by side. I am celebrating my brother. The other is waiting to celebrate me. The night before Daniel's wedding, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, heart hammering in my chest. I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who sat at the dinner table, desperate for her mother's approval. The teenager who cried quietly in her room after every insult. The woman had been told she would only embarrass the family. Tomorrow, that girl would die. Tomorrow, I will become someone new. Someone no one could erase. On the morning of Daniel's wedding, the house was in chaos. My mother shrieked orders, relatives scurried around, and Daniel strutted like a king. I slipped out quietly, dress bag over my shoulder, notebook clutched to my chest. No one noticed. No one asked where I was going.
Perfect.
Because while they were busy polishing Daniel's crown, I was walking toward my throne. The air smelled like salt and wildflowers. The beach stretched out in front of me, endless and shimmering beneath the morning sun. The tide rolled gently against the sand, carrying whispers that felt like promises. This wasn't just a setting, it was freedom painted in blue and gold. When I stepped onto the sand, dress flowing around me. I felt like the ocean itself had opened its arms. The gown, ivory silk with delicate embroidery, hugged me like it had been waiting all along. It wasn't traditional, not in the way my mother would have approved of. It was mine. Bold, fluid, radiant. Lila grinned as she adjusted the hem. "Ava," she whispered, voice trembling, "you're glowing." I smiled at her, heart thundering. I feel like I'm finally alive. The florist had outdone herself. Arches of white roses and eucalyptus swayed in the breeze, framing the horizon like a painting. Petals scattered across the aisle, catching the light. The scent mingled with the salt air, intoxicating and surreal. Guests began to arrive, friends from college, co-workers who'd seen my quiet strength, neighbors who'd always offered kind smiles. They hugged me, whispered encouragement, their eyes sparkling with something I had never seen from my family, genuine pride. "You look incredible," one friend said. "This is going to be everywhere. People need to see this." Every word fueled the fire in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every person who'd been silenced, dismissed, erased. The photographer moved quietly among the crowd, camera clicking like a heartbeat. She caught the way the wind lifted my veil, the way my fingers trembled as I held my bouquet, the raw emotion flashing across my face. "These shots are gold," she whispered to me between clicks. "I can feel it. People will connect with this. They'll share it. They'll talk about it." Her certainty steadied me. I wasn't invisible anymore. The world would see me. The string quartet began to play. The first note soared into the air, carried by the wind, wrapping itself around the guests around me. My chest tightened. This was it. I stepped forward, each foot sinking slightly into the sand. The petals cushioned my steps, and the ocean roared softly in approval. Everywhere I looked, faces beamed. Not a single one judged. Not a single one turned away. I realized then, this was the family I had chosen. At the altar, a close friend of mine stood waiting, ready to officiate. Their eyes met mine, brimming with encouragement. "Are you ready, Ava?" they asked softly. I swallowed hard. The lump in my throat was both fear and joy. More than ever. We began. The words weren't the stiff, rehearsed lines of traditional vows. They were raw, messy, true. I spoke about rejection, about pain, about being cast aside by those who should have lifted me. But then my voice grew steadier. I spoke about choosing myself, about finding strength not in approval, but in defiance, about carving a place in the world that no one could take away. Every syllable was a strike against the silence I had once lived in. By the time I finished, some guests were crying. Others clapped, their hands echoing against the sea. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt infinite. When the ceremony ended, cheers erupted. The quartet swelled, champagne corks popped, and laughter filled the air. I stood there in the sunlight, veil fluttering, bouquet raised high, and the photographer captured it all. She rushed over, breathless. "Ava, you don't understand," she said, spinning the camera around to show me the screen. "This shot, right here, it's iconic. It's going to spread like wildfire." On the display, I saw myself, standing against the ocean, eyes fierce, smile radiant, dress billowing like wings. For once, I didn't see the unwanted daughter. I saw a woman reborn. As the reception unfolded, laughter, dancing, joy, whispers began to ripple through the crowd. "Have you seen the photos online?" someone asked. "Already." I turned, startled. Lila rushed over, phone in hand, eyes wide. "Ava, it's happening." The photographer posted a teaser. "It's blowing up." I leaned in. On her screen, there was my photo, captioned simply, "She made her own story." The comments poured in by the second. "This is powerful. I don't even know her, but I'm crying. She's the definition of strength." My breath caught. The ceremony wasn't just mine anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. And the world was listening. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in streaks of pink and gold. I danced barefoot in the sand, surrounded by people who loved me not for what I could prove, but for who I was. As laughter echoed across the beach, a thought struck me. Right now, my family was sitting at Daniel's wedding, congratulating themselves, convinced they had erased me from the story. But the truth was already unraveling. Because while they had polished their crown for Daniel, the world was crowning me. And soon they would see. The morning after my wedding, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing nonstop. At first, I thought it was an alarm. But when I reached for it, the screen glowed with dozens of notifications stacked on top of each other. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all lit up like a Christmas tree. Bleary-eyed, I scrolled through them. And then my breath caught in my throat. There I was. Photo after photo of me standing barefoot in the sand, veil blowing in the wind, eyes locked on the horizon like I was daring the world to stop me. Each shot is more striking than the last. The photographer had kept her promise, she'd posted. And now the world had noticed. I sat up in bed, heart hammering as I clicked through comments.
Who is she?
This is breathtaking. She turned rejection into art. I'm obsessed. This belongs on the cover of a magazine. This feels like a movie. The numbers skyrocketed. 10,000 likes became 50. 50 became 100. By noon, one video edit of my walk down the sandy aisle had crossed 1 million views. 1 million. It didn't feel real. Lila burst into my apartment, her eyes wide and hair flying like she hadn't slept. She slammed her phone down on the table.
Ava.
You're trending. I blinked at her, still clutching my own phone like it might vanish. Trending. She nodded so hard her earrings rattled. Hashtag Seaside Bride is everywhere. News outlets picked it up. They're calling you the bride who chose herself. She spun her screen around, showing me headline after headline. Woman banned from brother's wedding hosts seaside ceremony. Inspires millions. Her family said she'd embarrass them. Instead, she went viral. The wedding story that's capturing hearts around the world. I pressed my hand to my mouth. Tears burned my eyes. It wasn't just likes. It wasn't just shares. It was recognition. The kind I'd begged for all my life. But now, it wasn't my mother's or my brother's approval I craved. It was my own. And I had it. By midday, my inbox overflowed. Brands wanted to collaborate. Magazines requested interviews. Strangers sent me long, heartfelt messages about how my story gave them courage. One message in particular made me sob. My family cut me off when I refused to marry the man they chose. I thought I'd never feel strong again. Then I saw your wedding. Thank you for reminding me that I can choose myself, too. I held the phone against my chest, whispering, "You're not alone." For the first time, neither was I. Meanwhile, my family had no idea. Or so I thought. Late that evening, my phone rang. It was my cousin, Sarah, one of the few relatives who had always shown me quiet kindness. "Ava," she hissed the moment I answered, her voice buzzing with static urgency. "What did you do?" I swallowed a laugh. "I got married." "I know," she snapped, though there was awe beneath her words. "I mean, the videos, the photos. Everyone's talking about it. Even at Daniel's wedding last night, people were whispering. Half the guests were scrolling through their phones at the reception. Your photos were everywhere." I pictured it. Daniel standing smug in his tuxedo, my mother glowing at his side, while whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. Their perfect night, interrupted by me. Sarah lowered her voice. "Your mom looked like she was about to faint. And Daniel, well, let's just say he didn't enjoy being upstaged." My lips curled into a smile.
Good.
That night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering outside, phone buzzing endlessly in my hand. My brother had his crown polished for him, but I had forged mine in fire. And now, the whole world could see it. The following morning, my mother finally called. Her name flashing on the screen made my stomach clench, but I didn't hesitate. I answered, holding the phone steady against my ear. Her voice crackled through the line, tight and trembling with fury. What have you done, Ava?" I leaned back in my chair, calm washing over me. "I did what you said I couldn't. I made it about me." She sputtered, words failing her. You embarrassed us. Do you know how this makes our family look? I laughed softly, not cruel, just certain. No, Mother. Do you know how it makes me look? Silence. I could almost hear her teeth grinding, her pride cracking. Finally, she hissed, "You've ruined everything." No, I whispered, my voice steady as stone. I've only just begun. When the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back wasn't small anymore. She wasn't desperate for approval. She was powerful. And if my family thought this was the end of my story, they had no idea what was coming next. Daniel's wedding was supposed to be flawless. The venue gleamed with chandeliers, tables dressed in ivory linens, and wine flowing freely into tall crystal glasses. The kind of event where everyone straightened their posture just a little, trying to match the elegance of the setting. My mother had envisioned it as her crowning achievement, the moment she could bask in the glow of her perfect son and his perfect bride. But perfection has a way of cracking under the weight of truth. At first, everything went as planned. Guests mingled, waiters floated past with trays of hors d'oeuvres, and the photographer's flashes caught the smiling faces of family members who had been instructed to forget about Ava. But whispers don't obey instructions. Halfway through the cocktail hour, guests began pulling out their phones. Someone gasped near the champagne table, their hand flying to their mouth. Another group huddled together, screens glowing as they pointed and murmured. Is that? Oh my God, yes. That's her. Unbelievable. Look at these photos. The ripple spread, quick and unstoppable. Daniel noticed first. He marched over to one of his groomsmen who was openly scrolling through TikTok, phone angled toward a cluster of whispering guests. What the hell are you looking at? Daniel snapped. The groomsman hesitated, then turned the phone. It's, your sister. Daniel froze. On the screen was me, barefoot in the sand, veil trailing in the wind, bouquet lifted high like a banner of victory. The caption read, "They said she didn't belong at the family wedding, so she made her own." Daniel's face flushed scarlet. Turn that off. But the groomsman didn't move. Behind him, more guests were already showing each other the video, laughing, crying, shaking their heads in awe. It was too late. By the time the bride made her entrance, the whispers had grown louder than the music. She's beautiful. But did you see his sister? It's all over the news. Her story's everywhere. Imagine being upstaged by your own family. The bride's smile faltered. She could feel the shift in attention, eyes not lingering on her dress, but darting to glowing screens under the tables. And my mother? She sat ramrod straight in the front row, jaw clenched so tightly her lipstick cracked. I wasn't there, but later Sarah told me her face had been pale with fury, hands trembling as she clutched her clutch bag. She couldn't stop it. She couldn't control it. Her daughter, the one she'd tried to erase, was stealing the spotlight from her precious son. When the ceremony ended, the whispers only grew. Guests clapped politely, but the applause was thin, distracted. People leaned over their plates at dinner, scrolling through the photos of my seaside vows, passing their phones around like contraband. One woman whispered loudly enough for half the table to hear, "Honestly, Ava's ceremony looked more magical than this one." Daniel's knife clattered against his plate. The breaking point came during the speeches. Daniel's best man had just finished, raising his glass with a broad grin, when someone at the back of the room shouted, "To Ava!" The crowd erupted in nervous laughter. Glasses clinked. Phones lifted into the air, snapping photos. "To Ava!" Voices echoed like a chant. The bride's face crumpled. Daniel slammed his fist onto the table, rattling the silverware. "Enough," he barked, his voice carrying across the hall. "This is my day. Not hers." But the damage was done. His outburst only cemented the story. The perfect groom, humiliated by the sister he'd tried to forget. Later, after the music sputtered on and the party limped toward midnight, Sarah slipped into the bathroom where my mother was pacing furiously. "She planned this," my mother hissed, voice shaking with rage. "She waited, and she struck like a vulture." Sarah dared to meet her glare. Or maybe she just finally took what she deserved. My mother's eyes narrowed. Don't you dare side with her. But Sarah only shrugged. I'm not siding with anyone. I'm just saying people are talking about Ava like she's a hero. And, honestly, I think she is. My mother's lips thinned, her silence heavy with fury. Meanwhile, Daniel sulked in the corner, drink in hand, watching his guests laugh over videos that weren't about him. His bride sat stiff and silent, her eyes red from crying in the bathroom. Their night was ruined. And they both knew exactly who had stolen it. Back in my apartment, I scrolled through the posts, my name climbing higher on trending lists. One video had already hit 5 million views. Another was a compilation of side-by-side clips. Daniel's stiff, formal ceremony versus my wild, radiant seaside vows. The caption read, "Who really won the weekend?" I laughed softly, shaking my head. It wasn't even about winning anymore. It was about finally being seen. But if my family wanted to treat it like a war, so be it. Because I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The morning after Daniel's wedding, I woke to a different kind of silence. Not the heavy silence of being ignored. Not the aching silence of loneliness. This was the silence that comes when the world is holding its breath, right before it explodes. I rolled over, grabbed my phone, and saw what I already suspected. The explosion had begun. Headlines blared across every platform. The bride who married herself and went viral. Her family excluded her. The internet crowned her. Seaside vows, a symbol of self-love sweeping social media. My face, hair tousled by the ocean breeze, bouquet lifted high, stared back at me from news articles, YouTube thumbnails, even memes. Someone had edited a clip of me walking barefoot in the sand over triumphant music. It already had 3 million likes. Another post paired my mother's infamous words, "You'll embarrass the family," with my radiant smile at the altar. The caption read, "Plot twist. She embarrassed them instead." I laughed until tears streamed down my face. By noon, my inbox had turned into a war zone. Emails flooded in from journalists, influencers, and even TV producers. "We'd love to feature your story on our morning show. Can you join our podcast to talk about family rejection and resilience?" "Ava, Vogue is interested in a feature. They're calling you a fashion icon after that dress." Each subject line was a reminder. The narrative wasn't in my family's control anymore. It was mine. But with attention came pressure. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Lila asked as we sat at my tiny kitchen table, phones buzzing between us. She looked at me with concern, not doubt. I sipped my coffee, the steam warming my face. "I think I've been ready my whole life. I just didn't know it." She nodded slowly. "Then say yes. Take the interviews. Tell your story. Make them hear you." Her voice cracked a little. "Do it for all of us who are told to stay quiet." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I will." That night, I went live for the first time. It wasn't planned. My notifications were overwhelming, my phone buzzing like it might burst, and on impulse, I hit the button. Within minutes, thousands of people had joined. Comments scrolled faster than I could read. "We love you, Ava. Tell us everything. You're an inspiration." I took a deep breath. My hands shook, but my voice was steady. I never thought I'd be seen like this. For years, I let other people decide who I was, or worse, who I wasn't. I was told I wasn't good enough, that I'd only bring shame. But yesterday, I stopped waiting for permission.
Ich chose myself.
The words poured out of me, raw and unpolished. And the more I spoke, the more the comments lit up with hearts, applause, people writing me too. I ended with a promise. This is just the beginning. Not just for me, for anyone who's ever been silenced. We deserve to take up space. We deserve our own spotlight. When I ended the stream, Lila burst into tears. "Ava, you just lit a fire." The fire spread. Clips from my live stream circulated instantly. Hashtags multiplied. Strangers stitched my words into their own TikToks, holding up signs that read, "I choose myself too." It wasn't just my wedding anymore. It was a movement. And that terrified my family. 3 days later, my mother called again. This time, her voice wasn't sharp with rage. It was brittle, trembling with desperation. "Ava, please. This circus you've started, it has to stop." I let her words hang in the air, tasting the irony. She hadn't wanted my voice at all, and now she wanted me to silence it. "No," I said simply. She inhaled sharply. "Do you realize what people are saying about us? They think we're cruel. They think we abandoned you." "Because you did," I replied, calm as the ocean. Her breath hitched. "We were only trying to protect the family." I almost laughed. By erasing me? Her silence was answer enough. "Mother," I whispered, voice low but unwavering, "the family name isn't what people are talking about anymore. It's mine." Meanwhile, Daniel's frustration boiled over. I didn't hear it directly, but Sarah called to tell me. "He's furious," she whispered. "The sponsors for his company pulled out. They said they don't want to be tied to his toxic family image. He's blaming you." I bit back a smile. "Of course he is." Sarah hesitated. He's drinking too much. He says you ruined his life." For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered the years of smug looks, the way he'd laughed when our mother told me I was a disgrace. And I realized Daniel had never cared about my life when he was at the top. Now he was just angry because I had stolen the spotlight. That night, lying in bed, I thought about all of it, the headlines, the interviews, my family's unraveling pride. And I understood something. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a transformation. The world had seen me, and there was no going back. The morning of my brother's wedding arrived like a storm cloud hanging over me, heavy and suffocating. I hadn't slept the night before. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of a celebration I was forbidden to attend, the decorations I had once dreamed of helping put together, the music that would play while my mother clapped proudly and my brother beaming in the spotlight. I rolled over in bed, the emptiness of my room pressing down on me. The silence was unbearable. I wanted to hear laughter, the sound of cousins running through the hallway, my aunt's sharp voice complaining about flowers not being perfect. That was the noise of family gatherings. That was the noise of belonging. But in my world that morning, there was only silence. I dragged myself to the window. From my second-story view, I could see cars lining up 2 blocks down. Guests in glittering clothes were already arriving at the church, their outfits shimmering under the golden morning light. Some of them were relatives I hadn't seen in years. My heart clenched. They had come from far away to celebrate him, but if they remembered me at all, it would be as the unwanted daughter. I could hear the faint hum of music carried by the breeze. Even from this distance, it hurt like a knife twisting in my chest. Every note reminded me that I was invisible. I pressed my forehead against the glass and whispered, "That should have been me, too. I should have been there." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I forced them back. I didn't want to look weak, not even in my own mirror. Still, the ache was too deep to hold in for long. As the hours crawled by, I found myself pacing. My mother hadn't even called to check on me. My phone buzzed once, and for a foolish second, hope flared in me. But when I picked it up, it wasn't an apology or an invitation. It was a family group chat photo, my mother in a sparkling gown, standing arm in arm with my brother and his bride, all smiles. The caption read, "Our proudest day." My throat closed up. My chest burned. I zoomed in on the photo until my mother's face filled the screen. She looked radiant, younger even, glowing with pride. I stared at her expression, searching for even the smallest shadow of guilt. There was none. To her, I truly did not exist that day. That was when it hit me, with crushing clarity. My mother hadn't just excluded me from the wedding. She had erased me from the story of our family. The thought sent me spiraling into old memories. I remembered being 12, standing backstage at a school play. I had a small speaking part, only 2 lines, but I was proud. I searched the audience for her face, wanting to catch her smile. But she never came. Instead, she was at my brother's soccer tournament, cheering until her voice cracked. She didn't even remember to ask me how the play went. Another memory. Me at 16, walking across the stage to receive an award for my essay in a state competition. I clutched the certificate, cheeks glowing with pride. When I got home, I held it out to her. She barely glanced up from her phone. "That's nice," she said, before rushing off to cook my brother's favorite dinner to celebrate his small football trophy. And then, the worst memory of all, the night I overheard her on the phone with my aunt, saying, "She'll never be like her brother.
He's our star.
She just doesn't fit in." Those words had branded themselves into me. And today, on his wedding day, she proved them true. By mid-afternoon, I couldn't stand the walls of my room anymore. I needed air, even if the air carried the faint echoes of the music and laughter I was excluded from. I walked aimlessly toward the beach, my sandals dragging through the sand. The seaside had always been my place of refuge, the only corner of the world that never asked me to prove myself. The waves didn't care if I embarrassed the family. The horizon didn't care if I was invisible. I sat on a weathered piece of driftwood and stared at the water. The ocean sparkled, alive, free. I thought about the glittering dresses at the wedding, the crystal chandeliers, and the toasts being raised in my brother's honor. Compared to that, I was nothing but a forgotten shadow. But as I sat there, the strangest thing happened. For the first time all day, I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking with anger. I was still. And in that stillness, a dangerous thought slipped into my mind, quiet but powerful. What if I didn't need their approval at all? The idea sat there like an ember, small but glowing. I imagined a wedding, not my brother's, not my mother's dream, but mine. A wedding where I wasn't erased but celebrated. A wedding where I wasn't in the shadows, but at the very center. And instead of whispers of embarrassment, people whispered in awe. The thought shocked me at first. I wasn't even engaged. I didn't even have someone to stand beside me at the altar. But that wasn't the point. The point was the vision, a celebration so beautiful, so radiant, that it would eclipse everything my mother thought I couldn't be. That night, when the fireworks of my brother's wedding cracked faintly in the distance, I sat on my bed with my laptop. My hands trembled as I typed, "Luxury seaside wedding venues near me." Photo after photo lit up the screen. White tents by the shoreline, twinkling lights under the stars, elegant tables set against the sound of crashing waves. I leaned closer, my heart racing. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how worthless I was. I wasn't thinking about being left out. I was thinking about possibilities. And the ember inside me, that tiny glow of defiance, sparked into something stronger. Maybe, just maybe, I could rewrite the story my mother had written me out of. The day ended with me staring at the ceiling, the sound of the waves faint in the background. My brother's wedding was over. The family would sleep peacefully, full of food and wine, their hearts swollen with pride. But mine beat with something else entirely: resolve. And as I drifted into sleep, one sentence repeated in my mind, steady and certain. If they wouldn't let me into their spotlight, I'd build a spotlight so bright they'd have no choice but to look at me. The morning after my brother's wedding, I woke up with my throat raw and my pillow damp with tears. My whole body ached, as though grief itself had weight. The house was silent, but I could imagine the chatter echoing at my mother's place. Relatives gathered for breakfast, retelling every detail of the wedding, laughing about small mishaps, praising my brother and his new wife. And once again, my name wouldn't come up. I lay there staring at the ceiling, the thought looping through me like poison. They didn't even notice I was gone. But then something else stirred beneath the bitterness. A flicker, a memory of last night's spark. The images of seaside venues I'd scrolled through in the dark. White tents by the ocean. Strings of lights swaying in the breeze. Me, radiant, celebrated, unshakable. For the first time in a long time, the image didn't feel like fantasy. It felt like a possibility. I swung my legs out of bed. My body resisted, heavy with despair, but my mind whispered, "Move." I made coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and pulled out my notebook. It had been empty for months. abandoned after my mother's last cutting remark, when I'd lost the will to dream. But now, with shaking hands, I opened it and wrote one word on the first page.
Wedding.
It looked absurd on paper. I wasn't engaged. I didn't even have a boyfriend. But the absurdity didn't matter. This wasn't about romance. This was about reclamation. About rewriting the script my mother had shoved me out of. Beneath it I wrote 3 more words. By the sea. My hand steadied as the letters took shape. My pulse quickened. For once, I wasn't writing about pain. I was writing about the possibility. By mid-morning, doubt started to creep back in. What am I doing? I thought. People will laugh. I don't even have someone to marry. This is ridiculous. But just as I was about to close the notebook, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ava. Ava had been my friend since college, the kind of person who always noticed when my smile was fake, who showed up with chocolate when life collapsed. We hadn't spoken much in the last few weeks. I hadn't wanted anyone to know how deeply my family's rejection was breaking me. Her text was simple. Hey, I know yesterday must have been rough. Want to talk? I stared at the screen, torn between shame and relief. Then I typed back, can you come over? Within an hour, she was at my door, her hair pulled into a messy bun, carrying 2 lattes. She looked at me, really looked, and I knew she saw the devastation in my face. But she didn't say I'm sorry, or that's terrible. She simply sat down across from me and said, tell me everything.
So I did.
I told her about the exclusion, the family photo in the group chat, the way my mother had erased me from the story. I told her how I sat on the beach imagining something different, something wild. When I admitted the word wedding, my cheeks burned. I expected her to laugh. Instead, she leaned forward, eyes wide. Wait, she said. You're serious? I nodded, my hands twisting together. I know how it sounds. I'm not even engaged. But, Ava, I need something. I need to prove I'm not the embarrassment she thinks I am. I need to create something so big, so undeniable, that they can't ignore me anymore. For a long moment, she just studied me. Then, slowly, a grin spread across her face. You know what? I love it. I blinked. You what? I love it, she repeated firmly. Who says a wedding has to follow the rules? Who says you have to wait for permission? If your family wants to erase you, fine. Throw the kind of celebration they'll never forget, with or without a groom. Make it about you. Her words hit me like a jolt of electricity. My heart pounded. You really think I could do it? I whispered. I think, Ava said, reaching for my notebook and tapping the words I'd written wedding. By the sea. You already started. That afternoon, we sat together on my living room floor, laptops open, scribbling notes, sketching ideas. At first, it felt like a game, 2 girls spinning fantasies about gowns and flowers. But the more we talked, the more real it felt. What if you had a long aisle, right on the sand, lined with lanterns? Ava said, her eyes sparkling. And a canopy of lights overhead. I added, sketching a string of stars in the margin of my notebook.
Yes.
And imagine the photos, the waves crashing behind you. It would go viral in seconds. That word, viral, sent a shiver down my spine. Viral meant visibility. Viral meant no one could erase me. We researched venues late into the evening. Some were impossibly expensive, the kind of places reserved for celebrities. But a few smaller ones seemed just within reach if I worked hard enough. Each photo made the vision stronger. I could almost hear the whispers of guests, stunned, impressed. I could see my mother's face as she realized the daughter she discarded had pulled off something magnificent. By the time Ava left that night, my notebook was bursting with sketches and lists. My body was exhausted, but my mind was alive, buzzing with possibility. The next morning, fear hit me again. Reality weighed in. I had limited savings, no event planning experience, and no groom. It was madness. But as I stared at the notebook, I realized something crucial. For the first time in my life, the madness was mine. Not my mother's expectations. Not my brother's shadow.
Mine.
I picked up my phone and called the first venue on my list, My hands shook as the line rang. "Good morning, Oceanside Retreat," a bright voice answered. "Hi," I said, my throat tight.
I'm
interested in booking a wedding venue." The words tumbled out before I could second-guess them. And just like that, there was no turning back. When I hung up, my heart was racing. It wasn't official yet, but the seed had been planted. A date penciled in, a tour scheduled for the weekend. I sat down hard on my bed, clutching the phone in my chest. This wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a plan. And for the first time in years, I felt powerful. The daughter who wasn't invited. The sister who embarrassed the family.
She was gone.
In her place was someone new. Someone who would make the world watch. And as the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting the ocean in gold, I whispered into the silence. "If they won't give me a seat at the table, I'll build my own table, on the shore, under the stars, and the whole town will want to sit at it." The weekend arrived faster than I expected. All week, I'd been counting down the days like a child before Christmas. My notebook was stuffed with sketches and ideas. My stomach was stuffed with nerves. Ava drove us down the winding coastal road in her little blue car, the windows rolled halfway down to let in the salty breeze. I clutched my notebook to my chest like a lifeline. She glanced at me and smirked. "Relax," she said. "You look like you're about to walk into a courtroom, not a wedding venue." "This is a courtroom," I muttered. "Except the jury is my entire family, and the verdict is whether I exist or not." Ava snorted. "Then let's make sure they get a show they'll never forget." The road curved, and suddenly the venue came into view. Oceanside Retreat. It wasn't just beautiful. It was breathtaking. A long stretch of sand kissed the turquoise water, bordered by a boardwalk lined with palm trees. The main building sat perched on a small cliff, all glass and white stone, reflecting the ocean like a mirror. Down below, a wide wooden deck extended toward the sea, already strung with fairy lights that swayed gently in the breeze. My throat tightened. I had imagined this 100 times, but the reality was overwhelming. It was the kind of place people traveled across the world to see. "This is it," I whispered. "This is where it happens." Inside, we were greeted by a sharply dressed woman named Clarissa, the venue manager. Her heels clicked against the marble floor as she led us through the lobby, her smile polite but measured. "So," Clarissa said, folding her hands as we stepped out onto the deck. "You're interested in booking a wedding?" "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Wonderful," she replied, though her eyes flicked to my bare hand. No ring. No fiancé at my side. She didn't comment, but the silence stretched. I cleared my throat. "It will be unconventional." Clarissa raised an eyebrow. "Unconventional how?" Before my courage could falter, Ava jumped in. "She wants to create something new. A celebration that's about presence, not tradition. A ceremony on the shoreline, at sunset. Think elegance, think viral." "Viral," Clarissa repeated, the corner of her mouth twitching with amusement. "Yes," I said quickly. "A wedding that makes headlines. Something the whole town talks about. Something unforgettable." She studied me for a long moment. Then, to my relief, she didn't laugh. Instead, she gestured toward the horizon where the waves were breaking in silver foam. "Well," she said, "if it's unforgettable you want, this is the place." As we toured, I imagined every detail. Guests seated along the sand, lanterns glowing as the sky turned purple and gold. A string quartet under a canopy of lights. I walked down an aisle carved into the beach itself. For a few minutes, I let myself sink into the dream fully, without shame. But then, as we reached the edge of the deck, Clarissa's tone shifted. "Just so you know," she said, lowering her voice, "weddings like this, they attract attention. Everyone wants to be part of something grand, which means everyone also talks. Sometimes more than they should." Her words lodged in my chest. Ava frowned. "What do you mean?" "I've seen it happen," Clarissa said. "Guest lists leak. Stories spread. People who aren't invited show up anyway. Big weddings attract big gossip, and not all of it kind." The breeze whipped against my face, suddenly colder. I nodded slowly, trying not to show how hard her words struck me, because I knew exactly who she was talking about. My family. If word reached them.
No.
I couldn't let that happen. Back inside, Clarissa slid a sleek folder across the table. Here are the packages. Dates are filling fast, but we do have a slot 2 months from now. Sunset ceremony, beach access, private catering. My hands shook as I opened the folder. The price tag made my stomach flip. It was more than I'd ever spent on anything in my life. Can we hold the date? I asked. My voice was small but firm. Clarissa tapped her pen. A deposit will secure it. The weight of the decision pressed down on me. This wasn't just an idea anymore. This was a leap. A cliff's edge. Ava touched my arm. Do it. I pulled out my card. My hands trembled as I signed the agreement and slid the deposit across the table. Clarissa smiled, crisp and professional. Congratulations. You've just booked your wedding. The words echoed in my ears like a thunderclap. My wedding. I wasn't engaged. I wasn't loved. But I was no longer erased. As we walked back to the car, my phone buzzed. My heart lurched when I saw the name flashing on the screen. Mom. I froze, the air squeezing out of my lungs. Don't answer, Ava whispered. But I did. Hello. My voice cracked. Where are you? My mother's voice snapped, sharp as glass. I called earlier. Panic surged. I couldn't tell her I was at a wedding venue. I couldn't tell her what I was planning. I'm at the beach. I lied quickly, just clearing my head. There was a pause. I could almost hear her calculating. Humph, she finally said. Well, your brother's reception was perfect. Everyone kept saying how proud I must be. It was the happiest day of my life. The knife slid deeper. I clenched my jaw, staring out at the ocean. My venue, my future. Good for you, I said flatly. And, before she could reply, I hung up. That night, I lay awake replaying Clarissa's warning.
Gossip. Leaks.
People showing up uninvited. The risk was real, but the vision was stronger. I touched the notebook by my bedside, tracing the words. Wedding. By the sea. For the first time, it wasn't just a dream. It was happening. But a whisper lingered in the dark, chilling and thrilling all at once. If they find out, everything could collapse before it begins. The Monday after booking the venue, I sat at my kitchen table staring at a blank sheet of paper. The words guest list were written at the top, bold and underlined. Below it, nothing. Ava leaned over my shoulder, sipping iced coffee. You're thinking too much, she said. Just write the names that matter. That's the problem, I whispered. What if I don't matter to them? The silence hung heavy. I tapped the pen against the page, the tick-tick-tick of hesitation filling the room. For years, family had been the list I couldn't escape. Weddings, birthdays, graduations. I was always the extra, the afterthought, the one seated at the edge of the table where no one noticed if I was gone. But this time was mine.
So I began.
The first 10 names. I wrote Ava's name first. Bold letters. The one person who had stood beside me when the rest turned their backs. Then a few old classmates I still trusted, people who knew the real me, not the version my family painted. A coworker from the cafe. My neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, always slipped me fresh bread with a wink. 10 names. 10 souls who wouldn't see me as invisible. But the more I wrote, the heavier the paper felt. Because I knew who not to write. No mother. No brother. No sister-in-law. Each omission was a slash across the page. My hand shook, but I forced myself to keep going. This wasn't their celebration. This was mine. Ava flopped onto the couch, scrolling through her phone. Okay, so the guest list is one part. But if you want this to go viral, you need a moment. Something unforgettable. Something that screams, look at her now. Her eyes lit up as she thrust the phone toward me. On the screen was a gown unlike any I'd seen before, sleek satin with a slit up the leg, but the train was painted with waves of blue and silver, as if the ocean itself followed the bride. My heart skipped. That Ava said, grinning. That's your moment. I pictured it. Walking down the aisle, the sea mirrored in my dress, every eye on me not because of tradition, but because I demanded it. A spark of something dangerous flickered inside me. Maybe Clarissa was right. Maybe people would gossip. But let them. I wanted whispers. I wanted stares. I wanted the kind of silence that falls when a ghost walks into the room, except I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was the bride. That night, as I pinned photos of dresses and lantern-lit aisles to my mood board, my phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Heard you've been busy. Big plans? Winking face. I froze. My blood turned cold. Ava leaned over my shoulder. Who is it? I don't know, I whispered. Another text followed. Wouldn't want the wrong people finding out. I dropped the phone as if it were on fire. My heart pounded in my ears. Block them, Ava said immediately. It's just some troll. Don't give them power. But as I blocked the number, unease crawled up my spine. Because trolls didn't know secrets. Someone knew. Someone was watching. The next morning, I returned to the sheet of paper. 20 names now. 30. But every time I added one, I scratched out another. The list wasn't just a record. It was a battlefield. At one point, my pen hovered over my cousin Emily's name. She'd always been kind to me at gatherings, slipping me food when no one else noticed. She'd even hugged me at my brother's wedding when everyone else walked past. But inviting her meant risk. One photo, one slip of the tongue, and my secret would travel straight back to my mother. With a shaking hand, I drew a hard line through her name. The pen tore the paper. That evening, Ava found me staring out the window, the sky painted in streaks of orange. You okay? She asked gently. I nodded, though my throat was dry. It's like every choice I make, I hear them whispering. I can almost see them at the edges, waiting for me to trip. Ava put her arm around me. Then don't trip. Make them choke instead. Her words steadied me, but only for a moment. Because when I turned back to the table, I noticed something strange. The sheet of paper with my guest list, the one I'd left folded, now lay open. And the last name I'd written, Mrs. Calloway, was circled in red ink.
My pen hadn't done that.
I tore the page out and shoved it into a drawer, slamming it shut. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Did you? I asked Ava. She frowned. Did I what? The list, I said. Did you circle her name? No, she said, baffled. Why would I? The air felt colder, heavier. Either Ava was lying or someone else had been in my apartment. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile I didn't feel. Never mind. But inside, one truth began to take root like poison. If I wanted my wedding to be mine, I would have to fight for it. Not just against whispers. Against shadows. Against whoever was circling names in the dark. And this time, I wouldn't lose. The boutique smelled faintly of lavender and polished wood. Rows of gowns shimmered beneath the soft golden lights, each one whispering promises of transformation. My fingers trailed across lace and silk, but my heart pounded too hard to focus. This is it, Ava whispered beside me. Your viral moment is hanging on one of these racks. I swallowed hard, trying to silence the voice in my head. My mother's voice, sharp and scornful. Don't embarrass the family. But I wasn't choosing for her anymore. I was choosing for myself. The attendant, a thin woman with sleek hair pulled into a knot, smiled politely as I explained what I wanted. Something different, I said. Something that looks like the ocean itself followed me down the aisle. She raised a brow, but nodded. We might have just the thing. Minutes later, I stood on a pedestal before a mirror, swallowed by satin and tulle. One gown after another. Too stiff. Too plain. Too forgettable. But then, she brought out that dress. The gown shimmered silver at the top, cascading into waves of deep blue at the hem, hand-painted swirls that caught the light like water in motion. The train was long, dramatic, alive. Ava gasped. Oh my God, it's you. I turned, the fabric rippling like tide pools. For the first time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt dangerous. This is it, I whispered. The fitting room curtain rustled. I froze. Through the crack, I swore I saw a shadow, a figure lingering. When I pushed the curtain open, no one was there. Only the hush of the boutique and the distant hum of traffic outside. I shook it off. Nerves, that's all. But that evening, scrolling on my phone, my blood ran cold. A photo of me in the dress, grainy but unmistakable, had been posted to a local gossip forum. Captioned, "Guess who thinks she's a bride?" The comments beneath were vicious. Isn't she the one who wasn't even invited to her brother's wedding? Pathetic. Desperate for attention. I dropped the phone. My lungs locked. Someone had been watching. Did you tell anyone? I demanded the next morning. My voice cracked with desperation. Ava looked insulted. Of course not. Do you think I'd do that to you? I wanted to believe her. She'd been my anchor through everything. But the doubt lingered. The photo hadn't taken itself. We have to be careful, Ava warned softer now. The more viral you want this, the more people will try to tear you down. Maybe even family.
Family.
The word tasted like ashes. Despite the whispers, I pushed forward. The seaside venue opened its gates for our first walkthrough. Lanterns swayed gently in the wind as the manager guided me down the path where the aisle would stand. My steps echoed against the wood planks, the ocean roaring behind me like applause. I closed my eyes and imagined it. The dress trailing behind me, the hush of anticipation, the moment I claimed the spotlight they'd always denied me. For the first time in months, I smiled. This was happening. That night, as Ava and I reviewed music options, my phone buzzed. A name flashed across the screen. Emily. My cousin. The one who had hugged me when no one else did at my brother's wedding. The only one who had made me feel like I wasn't completely alone. I answered quickly. Emily? Hey. Her voice was tight. Is it true? My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I heard, she pressed.
About the venue.
About the dress. About you planning this. My mouth went dry.
Who told you that?
She hesitated, then laughed bitterly. Does it matter? Everyone knows now. The next day, I got my answer. Scrolling again, I found another post online. This time, it wasn't just a photo, it was details. Venue name.
Date.
Even the concept of the ocean dress. And the post was signed with a familiar handle. Emily. She hadn't just told people. She'd broadcast it. My hands shook as I read her words. It's sad, really. She wasn't wanted at her own brother's wedding, so now she's making a mockery of marriage by staging her own show. Don't encourage her. She needs help, not attention. The comments flooded in. Laughing emojis. Snide remarks. My vision blurred with tears. Emily, the one person I thought might still care, had cut me deeper than the rest ever could. That night, Ava found me sitting in the dark, phone clutched in my hand. They won't stop, I whispered. They want me humiliated before I even begin. Ava's jaw tightened. Then don't let them. Give them something so big, so unforgettable, that their words choke in their throats. I looked out the window, the moonlight spilling across my apartment floor like a spotlight. Maybe this was never just about a wedding. Maybe this was war. And for the first time in my life, I intended to win. The whispers didn't break me. Emily's betrayal, my mother's cruelty, the online ridicule, they only sharpened me. If they wanted a show, I would give them one worth remembering. The morning of my seaside ceremony, the air smelled of salt and freedom. Lanterns swayed against the breeze, and the aisle stretched like a silver path into the horizon. My dress, painted in waves of blue and silver, shimmered like the ocean itself. Guests gathered, their phones already raised. But these weren't strangers mocking me online. These were people who chose me, who believed in me, who filled the empty seats my family abandoned. And then they came. My mother, my brother, Emily. Faces stiff, curiosity barely hiding their disdain. They hadn't been invited, but humiliation had drawn them like moths to flame. I didn't flinch. As the music began, I stepped forward. The crowd hushed. Cameras clicked, and in that silence I saw it the shift. Their eyes widened, not with pity, but awe. The girl they'd cast aside now glowed brighter than their entire ballroom. By the time I reached the altar, news reporters had pushed forward, capturing every second. Headlines would write themselves. Rejected sister hosts viral luxury wedding by the sea. I turned, meeting my mother's gaze across the crowd. For once, she looked small, powerless. I lifted my chin. "You told me not to embarrass the family," I said, my voice carrying. "So, I stopped being part of it." The crowd erupted. Applause.
Cheers.
That night, as lanterns floated into the sky and the ocean mirrored their light, my phone buzzed endlessly. Millions of views. Thousands of comments. The story had gone viral. But none of it mattered as much as this. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was unforgettable.